Despite what's considered normal in current times, the lands of Ishgard weren't always known for being frozen over so thoroughly. But nowadays, that's all anyone can think about when the land of Kurthus is brought to mind. The Seventh Umbral Calamity caused such a drastic ethereal shift that snow and ice became the norm for so many people. In fact, elemental ice had become so omnipresent that some people began to take advantage of its more obscuring properties. Gather around, my friends, as we delve into the story behind one of the most well-hidden dungeons in Eorzea. Today, we'll be addressing what was considered a heretical sanctum, a place known as Snowcloak. To understand the full history of Snowcloak, we must begin with the story involving an Ishgardian outpost called Falcon's Nest. Before the Calamity, this was quite the busy hub for many Ishgardian citizens, and as such, many different people lived here. However, Bahamut's rampage and the sudden climate change made staying at Falcon's Nest very dangerous. The sudden increase in snow and ice had cut off many of the usual supply routes, including a very important bridge that connected the western and central highlands. This bridge is called Gargoyle Crossing, and without it, it was only a matter of time until they either ran dangerously low on supplies or were overwhelmed by the Dravanian horde. The people of Falcon's Nest knew that to stay was to welcome a slow and cold death. So, instead of sitting around, they gathered all the supplies and people they could before heading east, hoping to reconnect with Ishgard proper and be saved by the Holy See. The biggest obstacle in front of them was Snowcloak, a massive wall of ice and snow made by the Calamity, which formed a natural barrier between central and western Kurthus. It was incredibly difficult, but the people of Falcon's Nest were resolute. They continued their journey across Snowcloak, determined to reach Ishgard and survive. At first, things were going better than expected. That was until the last group of civilians began making their way up the ridge. Unfortunately, some of the structure had come loose, creating a small avalanche as they were all buried alive beneath the uncaring cold. With no way to save them and no visible survivors, the rest of Falcon's Nest wept and mourned their neighbors as they continued their pilgrimage to Ishgard. However, there was a survivor. A young girl had managed to escape the icy tomb with her life. But with no way of following the rest of Falcon's Nest, she had no choice but to try and return to her abandoned home. And so she went back west, all alone and in the cold. But fate had different plans for her, as this young girl was none other than Eorzea Dongolain, also known as Lady Iceheart. The story of Lady Iceheart is one of tragedy, confusion, and how good intentions can still lead to wicked choices. However, the details of her story is one for another day, because at some point during the Seventh Umbral Calamity, she had awoken to the powers of the Echo, making it easy for the goddess Hydaelyn to discover her and grant Eorzea the blessing of light. Indeed, Eorzea was one of Hydaelyn's chosen, but the young woman chose a different path for herself after a fateful encounter with the White Dragon, Hraesvelgr. Upon beholding him, her echo activated, giving Eorzea a vision of truth. She saw a time where dragons and Elezen lived together in near perfect harmony. She saw the love that Hraesvelgr held for his chosen mate, Saint Shiva. She even saw the blasphemy of King Thordan as he betrayed everything that they had built together. Without understanding what the Echo was and how her new powers worked, Eorzea's mind was confused and tormented by these visions. All she knew for certain was that Ishgard was built upon a throne of lies, and in the name of the peace that dragons and men once shared, it must be torn down. Eorzea would use her gifts and the truth to rally those who had been treated so callously by Ishgard's strict and dogmatic system. After creating a sizable following, she eventually was given the name Lady Iceheart, as she and all of her allies became the embodiment of Ishgardian heresy. But as time passed, she and her band of rebels would still need one or more locations to gather their supplies and forces. Whether it's cruel fate or happenstance, one of those locations was Snowcloak, the same place that had set her on this journey. With its location being located between western and central Kurthus, this meant that the heretics could operate beneath Ishgard's nose without them ever knowing. And since Snowcloak was so heavily obscured by the shifting tundra, finding and following these heretics was near impossible for most Ishgardian soldiers. In time, Eorzea would order her followers to carve out large tunnels and rooms for them to use and travel along, creating the massive dungeon that was eventually discovered within Snowcloak. And as it turns out, a trusted adventurer would be the one to investigate these tunnels and determine what was happening within. Inside this dungeon, this band of explorers would discover all sorts of magic and monsters that have made an art out of using the element of ethereal ice. And it became very clear on first inspection that Snowcloak had become a nest for Eorzea and her followers to hide within. In a lot of ways, this was their home, or at least one of them. And as such, there were many defenses put in place to keep it safe. One of the biggest was a golem made entirely out of ethereal ice. This golem was called Wandil, and was created by Eorzea when she was testing the powers of her new primal form, that of the goddess of ice, Shiva. As Shiva, she created Wandil to act as an ever-vigilant construct that would defend Snowcloak from intruders. But despite its great size and command over ice magic, Wandil would be destroyed as our adventurers continued along their path. But Snowcloak was more than just a refugee for heretics. Many animals and monsters called this area their home, and Eorzea used that to her advantage, making sure that dangerous beasts would be easy to find for those who didn't know the safer paths. Monsters like the Yeti, and in its rage, it would attempt to stomp out these would-be interlopers. But just like Wandil, the Yeti would fall as well. No monster, dragon, or heretic would be able to stop them as they came closer to the core of Eorzea's hideout. It was at the end of their journey that they discovered something interesting. Eorzea and her allies had created a makeshift aetheryte crystal for teleportation spells. This had solved the mystery as to how the heretical band was able to move around so quickly without being spotted. But more importantly, this aetheryte crystal had a very close tie with a location of great importance: the Akafa Amphitheater. Unfortunately for our adventurers, this crystal was not left unguarded. A whorehound had been left behind to deter enemies from using it, but this wasn't just any canine. This was Fenrir, a beast that had bound itself to Eorzea and would protect her with its life. However, this is not the true Fenrir, as this whorehound was named after a spirit wolf of legend. The battle would be hard fought, and the adventurers endured a difficult exchange, as Fenrir fought to slay the intruders and prevent their tampering with the aetheryte crystal. But in the end, Eorzea's loyal hound would fall just like everything else in these tunnels, leaving Snowcloak in a state of disrepair and putting the heretics on the run. Snowcloak's history is one of death, to be sure. It claimed the lives of those traveling from Falcon's Nest. It became a den for Eorzea followers who used these tunnels to ambush and kill Ishgardians. And at the last, many of them would die in the attempt to defend it from the city-state's adventuring allies. From beginning to end, there was rarely a pleasant tale to be told of this place. However, it does perfectly embody the element of ice. At a distance, it can seem harmless, maybe even beautiful or peaceful. However, when exposed for too long, or lost in its cold embrace, death is sure to be close at hand. Let the lessons of Snowcloak and Lady Iceheart be a testament to the diverse power of ethereal ice, and a warning that surviving a cold, frozen tomb does not mean it won't continue to claim lives later down the line. So, in the meantime, I hope you stay warm, and as always, stay safe, my friends. Thank you all for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe and share this with your fellow adventurers? With your help, I'll try to reach out even further and bring even greater stories to you. Although, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my biggest contributors. A grand thank you to Amina Viltaria, Slippers, Potato, Sage Mouse, Sinalv Bagel, Cizani, and Travan Shea, with an additional nod to the scholarships on screen. Links to things like my Twitter and that of my channel artist Caddy can be found in the description. Thank you all for your viewership as well as your support, and I hope all of you have a wonderful day. Class dismissed.